and welcome back to Darvanalee Designs Studio. My name's Nicole Reed and we are at Block 1 for 2019, and this is a beginner's series of foundation paper piecing. Now, I'm not going to get you to go and buy any tools, as I've said in our intro video. We're going to use what we've got in our studios, so don't stress. We can get started with just the supplies we have. So this is the block that we're going to be doing. It is called Turnstile, and it is, as you can see, it is a very basic block. It's a pinwheel type block, and most of the blocks are going to be very basic throughout this series. So we are gearing it towards a beginner. So let's get started. Alrighty, so here we are at Block 1 for our block of the month for 2019, and as you can see, I have my templates here. All you need to do to get these is head over to our blog, and there will be a link there that you can click on and download your templates and also what your block looks like. You're going to need your fabric, and as you can see, I'm just using homespun this year, and basically you just need to pick 3 colors and make sure that they're contrasting, and I have gone into that in the introduction video, which is also in this playlist. So I'm just going with a red, black and white color scheme this year, and I've got my fabrics all cut out. You're going to need some tools as well, so you're going to need some paper scissors, because we do actually have to cut out some paper. You're going to need some thread snips, which are always important, a rotary cutter to trim up our blocks and our excess fabric. You're going to need some pins, and we have these little glass head pins here. They're perfect for doing this sort of work, and you'll find them linked up over on our website as well. You're going to need some sort of quilting ruler. I like to use a little 6-inch ruler. It's just handy to have, and also they are also on our website as well if you're looking for something like that. You're also going to need a piece of template plastic or maybe some cardboard, and I'll show you how to use that in just a bit. You're also going to need some sort of pressing, so whether that be a iron or a little mini iron or something along those lines, but I like to use just a little hand press, and they come in various different sizes. You can get them all over the internet. I got this one from the United States, and I will link up down below where I actually got that from. You're going to need some matching thread. A glue pen is always handy to have, or you can just use your glue stick, as make sure that it is actually acid free. And you also might need, and hopefully you won't, you might need a quick unpick, so have that on hand as well. Okay, so we're going to get started on doing our templates. So as I said in the beginning of the video, this is a foundation paper piecing block, and I'm going to show you how we actually do that. Your blocks, as I said, you've got your templates for your block over on our blog, and you will be able to download that over there. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get rid of some of this excess paper. So basically just grab your paper scissors and just trim around the outside edge here. Now you can see there that there is quite a dark line, and then there is a faint line. We don't want to cut on that. We just want to cut a little bit beyond that, so we know that we're definitely going to be getting our 1/4 inch seam allowance around the outside of our block. So we're starting off with a nice simple block today. Just there's a couple of seams to sew on this one, and it won't take you any time at all to do this. Okay, so we've cut out our template pieces, and you would have noticed that there is some letters and numbers on your template pieces. So you can see here that we've got A1, A2 and A3, and as I've said in a past video for foundation paper piecing, it's a little bit like paint by numbers, except we're quilting by numbers. Okay, so basically what you're going to do is you're going to get a piece of fabric that is going to cover this piece here, A1. Okay, so we've got our template here, and you can see here that there are some letters and numbers written on it, and there's some shading. Okay, so A1, A2 and A3. So we've only got 3 pieces of fabric that need to go onto this, and as you can see, it just looks like some 1/4 square triangles and then a larger triangle, and the shaded areas are where your colored fabric is going to go. So we've got 2 colors on our block here. We have a red and a black. and then we have the white. So you can see there that the larger one is our white. So anywhere where there is a background fabric, which is my white, it will be white on your template. Wherever there is some shading, it is where the colored fabric goes. And you can see there is a dark and a light shading. So where the dark is, that's where your dark fabric goes, and where the light shading is, that's where your lighter fabric go. So in my case, I have black and red. So this would be my dark fabric, and this is my light fabric, and then this is my background. So you can see how it is highly contrasted, even on the template as well as on the colored picture as well. Now, as I said, you can get all this down over on my blog, and if you have any questions whatsoever, I will put an email address where you can send some questions to me, and that's where all the questions from anything from our channel goes, and that'll be linked up down below. So you're having any trouble or you've got some questions, shoot me an email and I'll be happy to answer that for you. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get started on doing our fabric. So as I said, you can see here that we've got A1 is a dark fabric and A2 is a light fabric. So these are my fabrics I've got here. My white is my background fabric, and then these are my two colors, which is black and red. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a rectangle shape. So the first piece of fabric that's got to go on here is actually our black fabric, because I'm going to A1 here. Okay, and basically what I'm going to do is I am going to flip the page over, and you can see here that I've just drawn it back out again, and you might need a light box, but I'm not going to put the light box on camera because it actually reflects back and you can't really see much. So basically I've just drawn it out on the back so you can see what I've done, and this is what the section that I have to cover with my black fabric. So at this point I take my glue pen and I just put a little dollop in the center, and that's just going to hold my first piece. So you can see here that we've got to go past the template, so we have our 1/4 inch seam allowance over this side. We also need to have 1/4 inch here, and we also need to have 1/4 inch here going off the template as well, because when we sew all these templates together to give our final block, we need to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance on the outside. So basically what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to lay that on top, and yes, you can see that it is much larger than what I actually need. But you can trim yours down a little bit if you feel confident enough to do that. If not, just go with a larger square. I've incorporated extra amounts of fabric to cover for that, just in case you're an absolute beginner. Okay, so I've put that in place, and you can see that that's not going to come off. So now what I'm going to do is flip it over, and I'm just going to get my little piece of template plastic, and I'm going to place it where A1 and A2 meet on that line just there. Okay, and I'm just going to lay that there, and then what I'm going to do is actually pull the paper back, okay, and just crease that. And then I'm going to get my ruler, and on the 1/4 inch mark of my ruler I'm going to line the edge of this fabric up with that. So you can see there that there is a 1/4 inch of black fabric laying underneath that. Okay, so we're creating a 1/4 inch seam just now. Alright, so now that we've got that in place, and we want to make sure that that is accurate, we just grab our rotary cutter and we just cut that excess fabric off. And you can set that aside. Don't throw it away, because you might be able to use it further on down the track. And that's the great thing about foundation paper piecing. You can actually use a lot of your scraps. So now we're going to fold that paper back down to how it was, and we're just going to flip it back over. And you can see here now I've got a nice straight edge. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my red piece of fabric, and as you can see I've just cut strips, and I'm going to just make sure that that is actually going to cover A2. So I need to go off the paper, and I need to have 1/4 inch over here. Okay, so I'm just going to pin that into place and pretend like that's my 1/4 inch, and I'm going to fold it over. Okay, so you can see here that that's not going to cover the 1/4 inch seam allowance outside that inner square or the tip of my triangle there. So now what I need to do is readjust my fabric. Okay, so I'm just going to line that up there like so, and then I'm going to flip this over to make sure that it is working. So you can see there it is working, but I've got a little spot down here, and I just want to check to make sure, because I've cut my square a little bit bigger, that I am actually going to be into the 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm safe to now stitch that over. And I always tell everybody when I'm doing this, just take it slow. check to make sure that it is going to cover your section, because you don't want to have to unpick, because when we sew, we're actually going to reduce our stitches down to quite a small stitch. Okay, and I can see there that that is going to be absolutely fine and cover all my area. So now that I know that that's going to cover A2, I'm actually going to now pin it in place, and we're going to head over to the sewing machine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over and make sure that none of my fabrics are curled up. They're all sitting nice and flat. And then I'm going to stitch directly on this line here. And we're going to start 1 or 2 stitches into the seam allowance, and we're going to go 1 or 2 stitches into the next seam allowance down here. Okay, so stitching directly on that line and doing a reverse at the beginning and at the end. Okay, so you can see here that I've got my open toe foot on my machine, and that's just to show you that I'm going to be stitching on the line. I've got my needle in the down position, but the first thing I want to do is actually reduce my stitch length down to a 1.9. Now for my machine, that is quite a small stitch, and you will need to check your machine and just do a quick couple of stitches to make sure it's small. So basically what that will do is help perforate the paper, because we're just using printer paper today, and that way it keeps the whole exercise quite cheap for you. You can use different products that are on the market, but we're just going to go with what you would possibly have on hand if you were a beginner. So you can see here that all my fabrics are laying out and are nice and flat. I'm not going to sew them over, so if I lift that up, you can see there that they're not where I'm going to sew over on this side or anything like that. So I am pretty much right to go. So basically all I'm going to do is stitch that into place, and remembering to do a little bit of a back stitch. So just remembering, staying on the line. And if you are a beginner, an open toe foot like what I've got here is really good, because you can actually see where you're going. And you can see there, I'm just stitching on the line. And now I'm coming down to the end, and I'm just going to do a back stitch. And then I'll cut my threads. And that's as simple as that. You just sew on the line. So you can see there that my stitches are quite small, okay, and that's going to help perforate the paper, and when it comes time to removing the paper. Okay, so we've sewn that on there, and now what we're going to do is we're going to flip back our fabric, and that's where you get your little hand press comes in handy, especially if your iron is not near your sewing machine like me. And you just give that a quick press with your hand presser, and then we can turn this over, and you can see here that I've got all this excess fabric around the outside. So what I'm going to do before moving on to the next step is I'm just going to get rid of some of that excess fabric. So that big piece there can get set aside for the next time, and we know that our 1/4 inch is okay underneath because we had already created that. So if you find that your blocks are moving, like your piece of fabric is moving around on you, you can always just put another little dollop of glue, and that will just hold it into place, like so. Now we need to sew on A3. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to flip it over again, so we're looking at the template side of it, and we've got our piece of fabric, and now what we need to do is actually crease this here and trim off the excess fabric. So I'm going to grab my template plastic, and I just pop that into the center there, and then I just fold it like so. And you can see there that it's folded in half quite nicely, and I can now get rid of this excess fabric. So placing my ruler on the edge of the paper at the 1/4 inch mark, I can just trim off that bit there, and then I can trim off that excess piece there, and I can get rid of that. So then we can flip it back over, and now we are ready to add on to A3. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line my piece up again, just double checking before I go and sew it, and I just flip that over and I can see that that is going to definitely cover every section of A3. So again, we're going to flip our piece over and we are going to sew on the line again. So, and we're going to repeat that for every single block. Okay, so here we are at the sewing machine again. As I said, we're going to stitch on that line, and we've already reduced our stitch length down and everything like that. So now we just need to sew. Nice and slow on the line. So making sure that your fabric is nice and flat underneath, and then we're just going to sew on that line. And just one stitch into the seam allowance, then do a back stitch, and that's it. Our first quarter of our block is done. Okay, so we've sewn that down, and I've just used a contrasting thread so you can see where I've sewn, and you can see here that everything is stitched with a small stitch. And basically what we do now is we flip it over and then we put our fabric up to that side. And because this is such a big piece here, I am definitely going to just put a little bit of glue there just to hold it in place, so when I trim it up it stays nice and flat. Using my hand presser, and that just presses it all into place. At this point now, I will now trim up the block correctly. So grab your quilting rulers, and you'll probably need quite a larger one for this one. And basically all you're going to do is this dark line here, you're going to set your 1/4 inch mark on your ruler to that. Okay, and then you will trim up the side. So it's not on this outside line, it's on this inside line that we're going to put our 1/4 inch mark onto there. So basically what I'm doing is I am now creating my outer 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then you're just going to cut on that line, and that will get rid of your excess fabric as well, which you can set aside for another block. And you can see there that now the block is starting to take shape. So we'll spin that around, and again lay our 1/4 inch mark on the line, the darker line, inside line, and I've got mine lining up on the side and across the top as well. And then all I'm going to do is just trim that excess fabric off, and those bits of fabric can get thrown away. And there you are, our first block is done. At this point now I will actually head over to the ironing board and give that a bit of a press, and then I'll set it aside, and I'm going to repeat the exact same thing with the other 3 templates, and then we'll have all 4 templates done, and I'll show you how to assemble the block. Okay, so we've got all our template pieces done, so there was 4 in total, and now we're ready to put our block together. So using your diagram that you can download off our blog, you can sit that there, and then you can lay out your block pieces. So as I said, there are 4 components to this particular block, and you want to just lay them out. First one goes this way, then B goes this way, then C goes this way, and then D goes this way. And you can see there that that's like a pin, there's 2 pinwheels in there. So you've got the white, making sure that all your white ones are coming in and all your red ones are coming in. You don't want to put a piece like this, because then that's not going to be the correct layout. So once you've got all your pieces in the correct layout, what you're going to do is you're just going to take your A and B, and you're going to place them right sides together. And then what you're going to do is, I always pop a pin in just to make sure that it doesn't move on me. And making sure that everything is lining up. So you can see here, see how my 2 seams aren't lining up? I'll bring that up a bit closer. Okay, I want to make sure that everything is lining up. You can see there that it's come apart. So you want to take your time in doing this. Okay, if you find it easier to use Wonder Clips, use Wonder Clips by all means. So you're lining up your raw edges with right sides together, and you can see now that my diagonal seams are now aligning up. So what I do there is I pop a pin into that, and I know that that's not going to move. And then I'll come up here and make sure that all my raw edges are aligning, and then I'll pop a pin in there as well. So now I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew on that line there. And then we'll do the same with the last two pieces of the template, and I'll be back in a second. Okay, so we've sewn our two pieces together, and you can see there that I've definitely got a 1/4 inch when it comes time to sewing the two sections together, and it's all sewn in place. And we can just now lay that there, and then we take our last two bits and do exactly the same thing again, aligning our raw edges, making sure that our diagonal points are actually meeting and they're not misaligned. And you just do this the same way you would do normal patchworking when you're nesting your seams together, making sure that they're right sides together and all your raw edges are aligning. Then grab a pin, put another pin in. Again, we're going to start here off the edge, and we're going to stitch exactly on that line all the way and off the edge down here. Don't forget to reverse at each end. Okay, so that's our second one done, and now what we need to do is actually lay row 1 onto row 2 like so. And again, we're going to nest our seams, and we're going to align all of our raw edges. So you can see there that my seams are nesting quite nicely. And what I do before I even worry about aligning all the rest of the stuff, I actually put a pin straight away into that point, and then I know that that's not going to move. And then I just align up the rest of my raw edges, making sure that the fabric is aligning, and pop another pin in there. And then I'm going to do exactly what I've done every other time, is I'm going to start off at the edge, and I am basically going to stitch along that line all the way off the edge and reverse at the beginning and at the end, and then our block will be finished. Okay, so now that our block is all assembled, you can leave the paper on that because we've still got quite a few to make, and that will stop it from fraying or anything like that. Set that aside, and I'll see you here again next month for block 2. Okay, so thank you very much for joining me today. I really hope you liked making the first block in our series of 12. It's called Turnstile, and as I said, it's a nice, quick, easy block to make, and it's really good if you've never done foundation paper piecing before. If you like this video today, give it a thumbs up down below, hit that subscribe button and ring the little bell beside it, and that way you won't miss out on any future posts. As always, we love to hear from you, so please leave us a comment down below. And for those that don't know, my name's Nicole Reed from Darvanalee Designs Studio, and I'll see you all again next time. Bye for now.